The message arrived on a Tuesday morning, interrupting Consul Zexthara's breakfast of fermented kelp and mineral water. His assistant, a nervous young creature from the Vorthon colonies, trembled as she handed him the data tablet. "Sir, this came through the emergency diplomatic channels," she whispered. "It's from the humans." Zexthara's four eyes blinked in sequence as he read the simple text. The message was short, written in basic galactic standard. "Stay out of our space. This is your only warning." He set down his eating utensil and leaned back in his chair. The humans were sending warnings now? These creatures who had barely learned to travel between stars? Zexthara had been serving as a galactic consul for over 300 years. He had seen countless primitive species make similar threats when the hegemony first contacted them. They always said the same things. They wanted to be left alone. They claimed their space was sacred. They made bold statements about their strength. In the end, they all joined the hegemony. It was better for everyone that way. "Have you verified this message?" Zexthara asked his assistant. "Yes, sir. It came directly from the Terran Enclave's official communication array. No encryption, no hidden messages, just that one line." Zexthara stood and walked to the large window that looked out over the capital city of Nexus Prime. Ships from 100 different worlds moved through the sky like glowing insects. The hegemony had brought peace and order to this part of the galaxy for over 10,000 years. Every species that joined became part of something greater than themselves. "Pull up the human files," he commanded. His office walls lit up with holographic displays showing everything the hegemony knew about humanity. The information was limited but clear. Humans had discovered faster than light travel only 800 years ago. They controlled a small cluster of star systems around their home world called Earth. Their technology was primitive by galactic standards. They had no energy shields, no quantum computers, no telepathic abilities, and no dimensional manipulation technology. The reports described them as bipedal mammals with remarkably short lifespans. They lived for less than 100 years on average. They had only one brain, unlike more advanced species that had evolved multiple consciousness centers. Most concerning of all, they showed no signs of the mental evolution that typically came with space travel. Other species developed collective consciousness, or at least basic telepathy, within a few generations of leaving their home planets. Humans remained stubbornly individual. "They're clearly overcompensating," Zexthara muttered to himself. "Primitive species often make grand gestures when they feel threatened." His assistant cleared her throat nervously. "Sir, there have been some unusual reports from the border regions near human space." "What kind of reports?" "Well, sir, 3 different patrol groups have reported equipment malfunctions when they got too close to human territory. Nothing serious, just sensor problems and navigation errors. And there was that incident with the trade ship last month." Zexthara turned away from the window. "What incident?" "A cargo vessel from the Melody system tried to establish trade relations with a human colony. They sent standard diplomatic signals, but the humans told them to leave. When the Melody ship tried to land anyway, they said their engines simply stopped working. No damage, no weapons fire, nothing. The engines just turned off. The humans sent a small ship to tow them back to the border and wished them a safe journey. This was mildly interesting, but hardly unprecedented. Many species had basic defensive technologies that could disable simple systems. The hegemony had much more advanced versions of the same techniques. "Sir," his assistant continued, "the Council has been asking questions about the humans. They want to know why this species hasn't been contacted yet. It's been 800 years since they achieved space travel. That's longer than most species remain independent." Zexthara knew this was true. The hegemony's standard protocol was to make contact with new species within their first few centuries of space travel. It was easier to integrate them before they became too set in their primitive ways. Waiting too long often led to unnecessary complications. He walked back to his desk and activated the communication system. "Connect me to the Defense Ministry. I want to speak with Admiral Korth." The holographic image of Admiral Korth appeared above the desk. The old warrior's scales were a deep blue color that indicated either deep thought or mild annoyance. "Consul," Korth said with a slight bow, "what can I do for you?" "I need a small fleet for a diplomatic mission. Nothing too impressive, just enough to show that we're serious." "Where are you going?" "Human space. It's time we formally welcomed them to the galactic community." Admiral Korth's scales shifted to a darker blue. "Are you sure that's wise?" We've had orders to avoid that region for quite some time. Orders from whom? The instructions came down from the High Council itself about 200 years ago. We're supposed to let the humans develop naturally for now. This was news to Zexithara. Why wasn't I informed of this? Diplomatic matters aren't usually my concern, Consul. I assumed you knew. Zexithara made a mental note to have a serious conversation with his staff about information flow. Well, things have changed. The humans have sent us a warning message. A warning, Admiral. As if they could threaten the hegemony. This cannot be allowed to stand. Admiral Korth was quiet for a moment. What kind of fleet did you have in mind? Nothing aggressive. 12 ships should be enough. Mix of diplomatic vessels and light cruisers. We want to show strength but not appear hostile. I can have a fleet ready in 3 days. Excellent. I'll be leading this mission personally. After ending the communication, Zexithara sat back in his chair. His assistant was still standing nearby, looking worried. Sir, are you sure this is a good idea? The Council might not approve of direct action without consultation. The Council appointed me to handle diplomatic matters, Zexithara replied. This is clearly a diplomatic situation. A primitive species has sent us a warning. If we ignore it, what message does that send to other developing civilizations? They need to understand that the hegemony is the dominant power in this galaxy. He stood up and walked to the wall display showing human space. Their territory was small. Just a few dozen star systems clustered around their home world. Compared to the hegemony's thousands of systems and hundreds of member species, it was insignificant. Besides, he continued, this might be exactly what the humans need. They've been isolated for too long. They're probably afraid of joining galactic society because they don't understand the benefits. Once they see what we can offer them, they'll realize how foolish this warning message was. His assistant nodded, but she still looked concerned. What if they refuse to join? Zexithara smiled, showing his sharp teeth. My dear, in 300 years of diplomatic service, I've never met a species that refused the benefits of hegemony membership once they understood what we were offering. The humans are primitive, but they're not stupid. They'll make the right choice. He began making preparations for the journey. He would need diplomatic gifts, cultural exchange materials, and documentation showing the benefits of hegemony membership. He would also need translators, though the humans apparently spoke a version of Galactic Standard. As he worked, Zexithara couldn't help but feel excited. It had been decades since he'd had the opportunity to bring a new species into the hegemony. The humans would be a nice addition to the galactic community. Their short lifespans meant they would probably be eager to learn from older, wiser species. The warning message was just primitive posturing. Once he explained things properly, the humans would be grateful for the contact. 3 days later, Consul Zexithara stood on the bridge of the diplomatic vessel Harmony of Worlds, watching as his small fleet prepared to enter human space. 12 ships moved in perfect formation through the void, their hulls gleaming under the light of distant stars. Admiral Korth had provided exactly what Zexithara requested. 6 diplomatic vessels, designed for comfort and impressive appearance, accompanied by 6 light cruisers for protection. The ships carried the best technology the hegemony had to offer: quantum computers, energy shields, gravity manipulators, and weapons that could level cities from orbit. Approaching the outer boundary of human territory, announced the navigation officer, a thin creature from the Silicon Hills of Vex Prime. All systems showing normal readings, Zexithara nodded. Reduce speed to half normal. We don't want to appear aggressive. Begin scanning for human vessels or installations. The fleet crossed into human space without incident. No border guards appeared. No warning signals came through their communication systems. The star charts showed several inhabited worlds in this system, but their sensors detected no signs of civilization. This is strange, muttered the science officer, a elderly melody with silver skin that reflected the bridge lights. According to our information, this system should have 3 major space stations and regular patrol routes. I'm not seeing anything. Zexithara walked over to the science station. Perhaps their technology is more primitive than we thought. They might not have permanent installations. But sir, we know they have space stations. Our long-range sensors confirmed their existence from outside the system. They didn't just disappear. The fleet continued deeper into human space. Hours passed with no contact. Zexithara began to feel the first stirrings of annoyance. This was supposed to be a straightforward diplomatic mission. The humans should have detected them by now and sent representatives to meet them. "Sir," the communication officer called out, "I'm getting some strange readings on the emergency channels." "What kind of readings?" "It's hard to explain. There are signals, but they don't match any known communication protocols. The computers can't decode them." Zexathara frowned. "Are they trying to communicate with us?" "I don't think so, sir. It's more like background noise. But it's organized noise, if that makes sense." The navigation officer suddenly looked up from his station. "Sir, I'm having trouble with the stellar navigation system. Our position readings keep shifting slightly." "Equipment malfunction?" "I don't think so. The systems are working perfectly, but the data they're providing doesn't match our expected coordinates. It's like space itself is slightly different here than it should be." This was concerning but not unprecedented. Some star systems had unusual magnetic fields or gravitational anomalies that could affect sensitive equipment. Zexathara made a note to include this information in his report. "Continue on course," he ordered. "We'll proceed to the main inhabited world and attempt standard diplomatic contact." As they traveled further into the system, more strange readings began to appear. The gravity sensors showed fluctuations that didn't correspond to any visible objects. The energy detectors picked up signatures that the computers couldn't classify. Most disturbing of all, several crew members began reporting headaches and feelings of unease. "It's probably just stress," the ship's medical officer explained when Zexathara asked about the symptoms. First contact situations often cause anxiety, especially when the target species has sent warning messages. But Zexathara was beginning to feel it too. There was something wrong about this place. Not dangerous exactly, but wrong, like walking into a room where the furniture was all slightly the wrong size. "Sir," the communication officer's voice was sharp with excitement. "I'm detecting a vessel. Single ship moving on an intercept course with our fleet." Finally, Zexathara straightened his diplomatic robes and prepared to make history. "Put it on the main screen." The image that appeared made him blink in confusion. The approaching vessel looked like a simple cargo freighter. It was bulky and obviously designed for carrying goods rather than impressing anyone. The hull was a dull gray color with scorch marks that suggested regular use in asteroid mining operations. "That's it?" Zexathara asked. "That's their diplomatic vessel?" "Apparently so, sir. They're signaling for communication. Open a channel." The main screen switched to show the interior of the human ship. A middle-aged human woman sat in what appeared to be a very basic command chair. She had dark hair streaked with gray and wore simple work clothes. Her face had the weathered look of someone who spent a lot of time in space. "Greetings," Zexathara began in his most diplomatic tone. "I am Consul Zexathara of the Hegemony of Civilized Worlds. We come in peace to offer your species the benefits of galactic membership." The human woman listened politely, then sighed. "Yeah, we got your message. We told you not to come here." Her casual tone was not what Zexathara had expected. "I'm afraid there has been a misunderstanding. The hegemony has brought peace and prosperity to thousands of worlds across the galaxy. We offer advanced technology, trade opportunities, and protection from hostile forces." "Look, alien dude," the woman interrupted. "I'm Captain Chen Martinez, and I'm just hauling grain to Mars. I don't do politics. But since you're here..." She paused and touched something outside the camera's view. "Maybe someone should explain things to you." "Explain what things?" "Why we told you to stay away." Zexathara felt a flash of irritation. This was not how diplomatic first contact was supposed to proceed. "Captain Martinez, perhaps you don't understand the significance of this moment. The hegemony is offering your species a chance to join the galactic community. This is an honor that most civilizations would..." "Hold that thought," Captain Martinez said. She touched another control, and Zexathara heard a mechanical whirring sound from her ship. "Sorry about this, but orders are orders." The cargo bay doors on the human freighter began to open. Zexathara expected to see containers of grain or mining equipment. Instead, something was revealed that made his science officer gasp in shock. Mounted in the cargo bay was a device that the ship's computers couldn't identify. It wasn't like any weapon or tool in the hegemony database. The energy readings coming from it were impossible. The power signature alone was larger than what the entire human ship should have been able to generate. "What is that?" Zexathara whispered. "Just a little something we put together," Captain Martinez replied. "Hang on, this might feel weird." The device activated. Suddenly, 3 of Zexathara's light cruisers simply stopped working. Their engines went silent, their lights went out, and they began drifting through space like dead rocks. The ships weren't destroyed or damaged. They were just off. What did you do? Zexathara demanded. Turned off your ships, Captain Martinez said matter-of-factly. Don't worry, they're fine. No permanent damage. Your crews are safe, but those vessels aren't going anywhere until we decide to let them. Zexthara's mind raced. How had a simple cargo freighter disabled 3 military vessels in seconds? What kind of technology were the humans hiding? This is impossible, he said aloud. Captain Martinez shrugged. Yeah, we get that a lot. Someone will be along to escort you out of our space. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. The communication ended, leaving Zexathara staring at a blank screen. Around him, his crew worked frantically to understand what had happened to their companion ships. The science officer's instruments were going crazy, showing readings that violated several fundamental laws of physics. Sir, the tactical officer reported, the disabled ships are responding to communication, but they have no power whatsoever. It's like someone reached inside their reactors and just turned them off. Zexathara looked out at the drifting vessels and realized that everything he thought he knew about humans was wrong. This wasn't a primitive species making empty threats. This was something else entirely. Sir, the communication officer said quietly, I'm detecting another approaching vessel, much larger than the freighter. On the screen, a new ship appeared. Unlike the simple cargo vessel, this one defied easy description. It seemed to shift and change as they watched it, like looking at something through water. The sensors couldn't determine its exact size or configuration. Incoming message, the communication officer announced. A new human appeared on the screen. This one was younger, wearing what looked like a military uniform. She had short blonde hair and calm eyes that seemed older than her face. Hello, she said pleasantly. I'm Commander Sarah. I'll be escorting your fleet safely out of human space. Please follow my ship and don't deviate from the course I provide. Commander, Zexathara began, I demand an explanation for this hostile act. Commander Sarah smiled. Oh, we're not being hostile. If we were being hostile, you'd know it. This is just a friendly escort service. Your ships will be returned to full functionality once you're outside our territory. The strange ship began moving, and Zexathara realized he had no choice but to follow. The journey back to the edge of human space should have taken 6 hours. Instead, Commander Sarah's ship led them along a route that seemed to bend space itself. What should have been a straight line became a gentle curve that somehow covered the same distance in half the time. Consul Zexathara stood on his bridge, watching the impossible vessel ahead of them. His science officer had given up trying to scan it. Every instrument they pointed at the human ship returned different readings. Sometimes it appeared to be the size of a small fighter. Other times the sensors insisted it was larger than their entire fleet combined. Sir, the navigation officer said carefully, according to my readings, we're moving faster than our maximum speed. But our engines are only operating at quarter power. That's impossible. Yes, sir, I'm aware of that. Zexathara activated the communication system. Commander Sarah, I request permission to speak with you about your technology. The pleasant human face appeared on his screen almost instantly. Of course, Consul. What would you like to know? How are you moving our ships faster than they should be able to travel? Commander Sarah glanced at something off-screen. Oh, that. We're just smoothing out the space ahead of you. It's more efficient than letting you push through all those annoying gravity wells and magnetic fields. Smoothing out space? Sure, space isn't really empty, you know. It's full of all sorts of bumps and wrinkles. Most species just power through them with brute force, but that's wasteful. We prefer to iron out the rough spots first. Zexathara felt a headache beginning behind his eyes. That's not how space works. It is now, Commander Sarah replied cheerfully. Would you like me to show you the math? Fair warning, though, most species find our calculations a bit hard to follow. Yes, please transmit your data. A few moments later, his science officer let out a strangled sound. Sir, these equations, they start with standard physics, but then they just ignore several fundamental constants. According to this, they've redefined the speed of light as a suggestion rather than a law. Zexathara walked over to look at the transmitted data. The mathematics were unlike anything he'd ever seen. The humans had apparently decided that certain physical laws were inconvenient and had simply worked around them. Commander Sarah, he said slowly, these calculations suggest that your species has mastered dimensional manipulation technology far beyond anything in the hegemony database. Oh, we don't really use technology for this kind of thing, she replied. Technology is so limiting. You build a machine to do one specific thing and then you're stuck with whatever that machine can do. We prefer more flexible approaches. If not technology, then how? Commander Sarah was quiet for a moment as if considering how to explain something complicated to a child. Well, it's hard to put into words that translate properly. We just decide that things should work differently and then they do. That's not possible. You keep saying that, Commander Sarah observed. But here we are doing impossible things. Maybe the problem isn't that these things are impossible. Maybe the problem is your definition of possible. The communication channel remained open, but neither spoke for several minutes. Zexathara stared at the readings on his screens, trying to understand what he was seeing. The human ship ahead of them was somehow maintaining a bubble of altered space-time around the entire fleet. The energy requirements alone should have been beyond the capacity of any known power source. Commander, he finally said, what is your background?
What is your training?
I used to be a high school physics teacher, she replied casually. Taught kids about gravity and motion and energy conservation. All the basic stuff used to be. Well, that was before the awakening. Now I help with space operations when needed. What awakening? Commander Sarah smiled. That's a longer conversation. Maybe we should save it for when we have more time. Zexathara's tactical officer approached him quietly. Sir, I've been monitoring our disabled ships. Their systems are still completely non-functional, but the crews report that life support is working normally. It's as if the humans have selectively disabled only the systems they wanted to disable. This was becoming more disturbing by the minute. Selective system shutdown required incredibly precise energy manipulation. Even the hegemony's most advanced weapons couldn't target specific ship systems without causing collateral damage. Commander Sarah, Zexathara said, how did Captain Martinez disable our ship so precisely? Oh, Chen's always been good with mechanical stuff. She just asked the ship's computers to take a nap for a while. Asked them? Sure. Computers are pretty reasonable once you learn how to talk to them properly. Most people just shout commands at them, but Chen has a more conversational approach. Zexathara's headache was getting worse. Computers don't have consciousness. They can't be reasoned with. They do if you believe they do, Commander Sarah said. The universe is a lot more flexible than most species assume. You just have to approach it with the right attitude. The science officer looked up from his instruments. Sir, I'm detecting some unusual readings from our own ship's computer systems. What kind of readings? Well, sir, it appears that our computers are running more efficiently than normal. Processing speed has increased by about 30%, and power consumption has dropped. It's as if the systems have been optimized somehow. Zexathara looked at the screen showing Commander Sarah's calm face. Did you do something to our computers? I just suggested that they might want to run a little smoother while we're traveling together. Most machines appreciate a bit of encouragement. You're talking to our computers? Everything talks if you listen properly. Machines, space, gravity, even time itself. Most species just never learn to hear what the universe is saying. The navigation officer interrupted their conversation. Sir, we're approaching the boundary of human space. Through the main viewer, Zexathara could see a line of small objects floating in space. As they got closer, he realized they were simple marker buoys, the kind used to mark territorial boundaries. Nothing impressive or threatening about them. Those markers, he said to Commander Sarah, do they have some kind of defensive capability? Not really. They just let people know where our space begins and ends. It's polite to mark your boundaries clearly. But the reports from our border patrols mentioned equipment malfunctions when they approached this area. Commander Sarah nodded. Oh, that. Well, the boundary markers do send out a small request to visiting ships. What kind of request? They ask nicely if the ships would mind turning around and going somewhere else. Most ships are happy to comply once they understand the request. Zexathara stared at her. You're saying your border defenses work by asking ships to leave? Asking politely, Commander Sarah corrected. Politeness is important. And it's not really defense since we're not defending against anything. It's more like cosmic courtesy. As they crossed the boundary line, Zexathara felt a strange sensation, like stepping out of a room where the air pressure had been slightly wrong. Suddenly, his ship's systems returned to normal operation. The headaches that had been affecting his crew disappeared. Even the lighting seemed to return to its proper color. Behind them, the 3 disabled ships suddenly came back to life. Their engines restarted, their lights returned, and their crews reported that all systems were functioning normally. There you go, Commander Sarah said. Your ships are all working properly again. Safe travels, Consul Zexthara. Wait, Zexthara called out. I still have questions. About your technology, your capabilities, your intentions toward the rest of the galaxy. Those are good questions, Commander Sarah agreed. But I think you'll find the answers more interesting if you figure them out for yourself. Here's a hint, though. We're not really using technology at all. Then what are you using? Commander Sarah's smile became almost sad. We're using the one thing that every other species in the galaxy has forgotten how to use. We're using the simple belief that the universe should work the way we want it to work. The communication ended, and the strange human ship simply vanished. Not quickly, not with any flash of light or distortion. It was there one moment and gone the next, as if it had never existed at all. Zexthara's fleet found itself alone at the edge of human space, with 12 ships full of confused crew members and sensor readings that made no sense. In the distance, the small boundary markers continued their patient orbit, sending out their polite requests for visitors to turn around. Sir, his science officer said quietly. What do we do now? Zexthara looked back toward human space where nothing visible suggested the incredible power he had just witnessed. Now, he said slowly, we go home, and we write a very interesting report. The journey back to hegemony space gave Consul Zexthara plenty of time to think, but thinking only made things worse. Every time he tried to analyze what had happened in human territory, his mind ran into walls that shouldn't exist. Commander Sarah had maintained contact during the first part of their journey home. She said it was to make sure they didn't get lost, but Zexthara suspected she had other reasons. The human seemed genuinely curious about his reactions to what she called the human way of doing things. You seem troubled, Commander Sarah observed during one of their conversations. Her image appeared calm and friendly on his screen, but there was something in her eyes that suggested she understood more than she was saying. I'm trying to understand your capabilities, Zexthara admitted. Your species appears to have abilities that our science says are impossible. What does your science say about consciousness? Commander Sarah asked. Consciousness is an emergent property of complex neural networks. It arises naturally when a brain reaches sufficient complexity. And what about will? What about the power of decision and choice? Zexthara frowned. Will is simply the result of neural processes weighing different options and selecting one. Commander Sarah nodded thoughtfully. That's what we used to think too, back when we were still limited by what we thought was possible. What changed? We discovered that consciousness isn't just something that happens inside brains. It's something that interacts with reality at a fundamental level. Most species learn to use tools to change their environment. We learn to use consciousness directly. Zexthara's science officer, who had been listening to the conversation, stepped forward. Commander, are you suggesting that your species has developed psychic abilities? Not psychic exactly, Commander Sarah replied. Psychic implies something mystical or supernatural. What we do is completely natural. We just refuse to accept limitations that other species take for granted. Can you give me an example? Zexthara asked. Sure. When I was a teacher, I had a student named Marcus who was terrible at math. He just couldn't understand fractions. His brain seemed to reject the concept completely. One day I told him that fractions weren't really rules, they were just suggestions. I showed him that if he believed hard enough that 1/2 plus 1/2 could equal 1 1/4, then for him, it would. Zexthara blinked. But that's mathematically incorrect, is it? According to whose mathematics? Marcus started getting perfect scores on his tests after that, not because he learned conventional math, but because he learned to make math work the way he needed it to work. That's impossible. Commander Sarah smiled. Marcus went on to become one of our best space engineers. He designed ships that travel faster than light should allow, carry more cargo than their size should permit, and use less energy than physics says they need. All because he learned that mathematics is negotiable. The science officer made a strangled sound. You can't just negotiate with fundamental constants. Why not? Commander Sarah asked reasonably. Who decided that those constants were truly constant? Other species assume that the universe has fixed rules because their tools and instruments tell them so. But tools are limited by the assumptions of their creators. Zexthara felt like he was trying to grasp water with his hands. Every time he thought he understood what the humans were saying, the concept slipped away. Commander, are you telling me that your entire species has developed the ability to ignore the laws of physics? Not ignore them, Commander Sarah corrected. We negotiate with them. The universe is much more reasonable than most people assume. It's willing to make exceptions if you ask politely and have a good reason. What kind of good reason? Human reasons. We need to visit other stars, so we convinced space that the distance between them isn't really that important. We need to carry large cargo loads, so we persuaded gravity that our ships could be lighter than they appear. We need to power our vessels, so we negotiated with energy conservation to give us better efficiency. Zexathara's navigation officer approached hesitantly. Sir, I hate to interrupt, but we're receiving some strange readings again. What kind of readings? Well, sir, it appears that our travel time to hegemony space has been reduced by approximately 40%. We're covering distance faster than we should be able to, but our engines are operating normally. Zexathara looked at Commander Sarah, who shrugged innocently. I thought you might appreciate getting home sooner. Long journeys can be tedious, Credo. You're altering space around our ships, just smoothing out a few rough patches. Nothing dramatic. The universe doesn't mind small adjustments if they don't hurt anyone. The tactical officer joined the growing group around Zexathara's command station. Sir, I've been monitoring our disabled ships during the journey. Their systems have been running at peak efficiency ever since Commander Sarah reactivated them. Better than peak efficiency, actually. It's as if someone has been gradually improving their performance. I mentioned to their computers that they might enjoy running more smoothly, Commander Sarah explained. Most machines appreciate the suggestion. Zexathara rubbed his temples, feeling another headache building. Commander, how many humans have these abilities? All of us, to some degree. Some are better at it than others. Chen Martinez, the captain you met earlier, has always been good with machines. She can convince almost any piece of technology to work better than its designers intended. And you? I specialize in spatial relationships, making distances shorter, making spaces larger than they should be, convincing gravity to be more flexible, that sort of thing. How did you learn to do this? Commander Sarah was quiet for a moment. It started about 300 years ago. A human scientist named Dr. Elena Vasquez was working on a faster-than-light drive. The mathematics said it was impossible, but she needed it to work anyway. Her daughter was on a colony ship that was running out of supplies, and conventional propulsion couldn't reach them in time. What did she do? She decided that the mathematics were wrong. She sat down with her equations and told them that they were going to find a way to make her engine work, whether they liked it or not. She worked for 72 hours straight, refusing to eat or sleep until the numbers agreed to cooperate. Zexathara stared at her. That's not how mathematics works. It worked for Dr. Vasquez. Her engine not only functioned, it worked better than her original specifications. She saved her daughter and realized that the universe had been waiting for someone to argue with it properly. And then, she taught others. The techniques spread. We discovered that reality is much more flexible than anyone had imagined. Most species develop tools to work within the laws of physics. We developed the ability to work with physics directly. The communication officer interrupted. Sir, we're approaching hegemony space. Admiral Korth is requesting an immediate briefing. Zexathara looked at the screen showing Commander Sarah's calm face. Commander, I need to ask you a direct question. Are humans a threat to the hegemony? Only if the hegemony tries to force us to do things we don't want to do, she replied honestly. We're not aggressive. We don't want to conquer anyone or spread our influence. We just want to be left alone to develop in our own way. But you could be dangerous if threatened? Commander Sarah's expression became serious. Consul, we're the species that convinced the universe to give us faster-than-light travel because we needed it. We're the people who decided that the distance between stars was inconvenient and negotiated it down to something more reasonable. We made mathematics flexible because rigid equations were getting in our way. She paused, letting that sink in. If someone really threatened us, what do you think we might convince the universe to do? Zexathara felt a chill run through his body. The implications were staggering. A species that could negotiate with reality itself, that could convince the fundamental forces of nature to behave differently, that could make the impossible merely improbable. I understand, he said quietly. I hope you do, Commander Sarah replied. We sent that warning message because we genuinely want to avoid conflicts. It's better for everyone if we just stay in our own space and continue our development peacefully. What are you developing toward? Commander Sarah smiled, but there was something almost sad about it. We're trying to figure out what happens when a species becomes truly free from limitations. When you can convince reality to work the way you want it to work, what do you do with that power? It's a bigger question than you might think. The communication ended as they crossed into hegemony space. Commander Sarah's ship, which had been escorting them, simply faded away like morning mist. Zexathara stood on his bridge, looking out at the familiar stars of hegemony territory. Everything looked normal, but he knew that his understanding of what was normal had been fundamentally changed. His assistant approached with a data tablet. "Sir, Admiral Korth is requesting your immediate presence for debriefing. The High Council wants a full report within 6 hours. Zexathara took the tablet and stared at it for a long moment. How do you explain to a galaxy-spanning civilization that their understanding of reality is incomplete? How do you tell the most advanced species in known space that a group of primitive humans had casually redefined the laws of physics? The debriefing room on Nexus Prime was designed to be intimidating. High ceilings, dark walls, and a circular table where the most powerful beings in the galaxy could sit in judgment. Consul Zexathara had been in this room many times before, usually to receive commendations for successful diplomatic missions. Today felt different. Admiral Korth sat across from him, along with 3 members of the High Council. The recording devices were active, and every word would be analyzed by teams of experts across the hegemony. "Begin your report, Consul," said Council Member Vexhan, an ancient being whose species had been part of the hegemony for over 8,000 years. Zexathara activated his presentation screen and began with the basic facts: the warning message, the fleet composition, the approach to human space. He kept his voice steady and professional, but he could see the skepticism growing in his audience's faces as he described the encounter with Captain Martinez. "You're claiming," Admiral Korth interrupted, "that a single cargo vessel disabled 3 of our light cruisers?" "Yes, Admiral. Without apparent weapons fire, without causing structural damage, and without any technology that our sensors could identify." "How is that possible?" Zexathara had been dreading this question. According to Commander Sarah, the humans simply asked the ship's computers to stop working. The silence in the room was deafening. Council Member Thexara, whose crystalline body was glowing with what Zexathara recognized as extreme agitation, finally spoke. "Consul, are you suggesting that humans have developed telepathic communication with artificial intelligence?" "Not telepathic exactly. They claim to have learned to communicate directly with what they call the fundamental forces of reality." More silence. Admiral Korth's scales had shifted to the deep purple color that indicated either serious concern or barely controlled anger. "Continue your report," Council Member Vexhan said coldly. Zexathara described the escort journey, the impossible ship that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions, and Commander Sarah's casual explanation of human capabilities. With each detail, he could see his audience becoming more skeptical. "Consul," Admiral Korth said when the report was finished, "do you have any physical evidence to support these claims?" "The sensor logs from all 12 ships, sir. The energy readings, the spatial distortions, the performance improvements to our computer systems. Show us." Zexathara activated the sensor data. The room's holographic projectors displayed 3-dimensional representations of the encounters. The readings were clearly impossible according to conventional physics, but they were also clearly real. Council Member Thexara's crystalline body dimmed as she studied the data. "These readings suggest energy manipulation on a scale that would require the output of multiple star systems." "Yes, Council Member. From a single cargo vessel. Yes. That was operated by 1 human." "Yes." Council Member Zexhan leaned forward. "Consul, what is your assessment of human intentions toward the hegemony?" This was the crucial question. Zexathara had spent days thinking about his answer. "Based on my interactions with Commander Sarah, the humans appear to have no aggressive intentions toward the hegemony or any other species. They simply want to be left alone to continue their development. And what are they developing? They're learning to negotiate directly with reality itself, to convince the universe to work according to their needs rather than according to fixed physical laws." Admiral Korth stood up abruptly. "That's impossible. Admiral, with respect, I've seen them do it. They shortened the distance between star systems because they found space travel inconvenient. They made mathematics flexible because rigid equations were limiting their engineering capabilities. They convinced energy conservation to give them better efficiency because they needed more power. You're describing magic, not science. I'm describing a species that has moved beyond the need for traditional technology. Zexithera replied. They don't build tools to work within physical laws. They work with physical laws directly. Council member Vexhan activated her communication device. Bring in the analysis team. A group of scientists entered the room, led by the hegemony's chief physicist, Dr. Molteran. They had obviously been studying the sensor data while Zexithara gave his report. Doctor, Council member Vexhan said, what is your analysis of this data? Dr. Molteran's multiple arms gestured nervously. The readings are genuine, Council member. Our instruments were functioning properly, and the data has not been tampered with. However, the phenomena described violate several fundamental principles of physics. Could this be technology we haven't encountered before? No known technology could produce these effects. The energy requirements alone would be beyond the capacity of any power source we're familiar with. Then how do you explain it? Dr. Molteran was quiet for a long moment. We can't explain it. Not within our current understanding of how the universe works. Admiral Korth activated a display showing human space. What do you recommend we do about this situation? Zexithera stood up. Admiral, Council members, I strongly recommend that we respect the humans' request to be left alone. Based on what? Reasoning? Based on the fact that they have capabilities we cannot understand or counter. Commander Sarah made it clear that humans are not aggressive, but she also made it clear what might happen if they were truly threatened. What did she say, exactly? Zexithera recalled the conversation word for word. She said that humans had convinced the universe to give them faster-than-light travel because they needed it. They had negotiated the distance between stars down to something more convenient. They had made mathematics flexible because rigid equations were getting in their way. Then she asked what I thought they might convince the universe to do if someone really threatened them. The room fell silent again. Council member Thexara's crystalline body was now glowing so brightly that it hurt to look at her directly. Are you saying, she asked slowly, that this species could potentially convince reality itself to work against us? I'm saying that we don't understand the limits of their capabilities, and I don't think we want to find out what those limits are. Admiral Korth studied the display of human space. They control such a small territory, just a few dozen star systems. Admiral, territory isn't what makes them dangerous. A species that can redefine the laws of physics doesn't need large amounts of space to be a threat. Dr. Molteran cleared his throat. If I may, there's another consideration. If humans have truly learned to interact directly with fundamental forces, they might be able to teach other species to do the same. Council member Vexhan turned toward him. Explain. Well, if their abilities are learnable rather than innate, contact with them could potentially spread these techniques to other species. That could destabilize the entire galactic order. Or, said Zexithara quietly, it could advance every species in the galaxy beyond anything we can currently imagine. That's exactly the problem, Council member Vexhan replied. The hegemony has maintained peace and stability for 10,000 years by ensuring that no single species gains overwhelming advantages over others. A technology that allows direct manipulation of reality would upset that balance completely. Admiral Korth nodded. The humans aren't just refusing to join the hegemony. They're potentially offering an alternative to everything the hegemony represents. Which brings us back to the original question, Council member Thexara said. What do we do about them? Zexithara looked around the room at the most powerful beings in the galaxy. For the first time in his 300 years of service, he saw uncertainty in their faces. Council members, he said formally, I recommend that we officially designate human space as a restricted zone. No hegemony vessels should enter their territory. No attempts should be made to contact them. No surveillance operations should be conducted in their region. You're recommending that we simply ignore them? I'm recommending that we respect their clearly stated wishes to be left alone. And I'm recommending that we hope they continue to have no interest in expanding beyond their current territory. Council member Vexhan was quiet for several minutes, consulting with the other council members through private communication channels. Finally, she spoke. The council will consider your recommendations, Consul. In the meantime, you are to discuss this mission with no one outside this room. The information you've gathered is now classified at the highest levels. Yes, council member. One final question, Consul. In your personal opinion, do you believe the humans when they say they have no aggressive intentions? Zexathara thought about Commander Sarah's calm demeanor, her obvious intelligence, and the sadness he had seen in her eyes when she talked about the responsibility that came with unlimited power. Yes, he said, I believe them. But I also think they're still figuring out what they want to do with their abilities. They're asking the same questions we are, just from a very different perspective. And what questions are those? What happens when a species becomes truly free from limitations? What do you do when you can convince reality to work the way you want it to work? How do you use that kind of power responsibly? Council member Vex Han deactivated the recording devices. The session is concluded. Consul Zexathara, you will submit a full written report within 24 hours.